I'm Matt Ramage.
I'm Dustin.
And this is the show Before the Dust Settles, a show dedicated to real conversations with people, entrepreneurs and creative types, just finding different ways about life, and they're interesting.
That did sound pretty good.
I got it pretty good. We're getting better. Today we have Becky Palmer on the show, and we're going to talk a little bit about what she does for people. She's a personal coach as well as a professional pharmacist, but she's leaving that behind slowly, and we're going to talk about her journey as a coach. And
we even touch on theoretical physics for a minute, which is a lot of fun. So this conversation goes in a few different directions. It was really great. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, hope you enjoy.
Right on. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Health and relationship coach.
Sorry. She's a health and relationship coach here in Saskatoon, Becky Palmer.
We had one job. I said thank you in the intro. It's ridiculous.
I can cut that, but I'm not gonna. I'm very interested in what you do. Mm-hmm. Oh shoot, I'm gonna start this timer. We're not cutting. You'll see me walking up here. So I'm very interested in what you do. Mm-hmm. And I've been a client of yours in the past. Mm-hmm. And you're a professional pharmacist, mm-hmm. getting your master's.
Doing my master's in counseling psychology.
Okay, so it's like not
pharmacy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I've met you on the stage of, we're in the 220 here. You have, what's your company called?
Brilliance Health Coaching.
And so I have my own personal experience with you, which was really great, mm-hmm. For me as a person.
As a human.
As a human, yeah. So why don't you, I know Dustin, I've kind of given him a Cole's Notes a little bit. I don't know, probably have really bad Cole's Notes.
Yeah, I'd much rather hear it from you.
Well, I'm actually curious to hear how you would explain it, because...
Oh, I don't know if I could. I've got a very limited scope of understanding of what you do. I guess if I had to, I would say personal and relational coaching and almost emotional therapy, but I don't actually know.
Yeah, that's pretty close. So there's coaching and there's counseling and then there's therapy and then there's psychology and there's all these different branches that are kind of aiming at the same thing. And we're just human and we're just talking. We just basically have conversations. And the difference between counseling and coaching, in my mind, is that a counselor is looking at something that's broken, like a diagnosis. Like you have generalized anxiety disorder, or you have depression, or you have something that's going on, and we need to fix it, right? Whereas a coach isn't necessarily looking at you like you're broken. Like you coach a basketball team or you coach somebody to just be better than they are. Does that make sense so far? Mm-hmm. And so we're pulling out natural talent, natural knowledge, we're pulling all of that out. I just have the skill to go in there and pull those things out with the underlying premise of you're not broken. You're actually fine. We just have things to uncover. So to me, that's an important distinction, because in the medical world, when we treat people like they're broken, they tend to continue to act like they're broken, right? So it's more empowering in my opinion.
So with that being said then, is there a natural starting point for somebody that's seeking out help? Like is there a common theme between all the people or many of the people that you work with?
I would say there's a few themes, yeah. So I'm working in this kind of subclinical realm. So if it's at the point where you're in crisis mode, you probably should see a doctor or a counselor or a psychiatrist, right?
What defines a crisis?
Like the inability to function and cope. So we're really going from like rock bottom. Whereas the people that I work with are functionally, they're doing okay. Like their lives are okay. And even from the outside perspective, they might look like they're doing really well. And that's actually easier to go from like really crappy to okay. But I'm taking people from going okay to really good. And that, you know how when we go to the gym, we tend to plateau? You know, it's like easy at first to lose weight and then you plateau. So I'm taking people at that plateau stage where they're still like bumping along, but they're not fulfilled, they're not happy. Relationship's okay, they don't want to break up, but they also aren't really pumped either. So I can take you from going from good to amazing, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
How confident are you in your process? If let's say somebody comes to you to talk about their relationship, and they're okay, but they're clearly seeking out help. How confident are you in if people put in the work on their end? How confident are you in your process and being able to help people?
I know what I coach is I've done everything that I've coached on, I've done myself. So I know I've seen those results, and that's my main source of confidence, is that I know for me, I've healed a lot of anxiety. For me, I've healed a lot of relationship issues. For me, I've healed some health issues too. So in that sense, I have confidence that I can give you tools that will also work for you because I've done them myself. I'm not just reading out of a book and telling you like, oh, this exercise should work according to da 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 da. So I know firsthand what has worked for me. That being said, I can't guarantee any kind of outcome because we just don't know, right? So like, for example, a couple comes to me and they want to stay together. And then over time, and we work on that. We work on that goal, right? And to do the best to our ability to fulfill that desire. But those desires may shift and change as the people grow and shift and change. So I can't guarantee that they're going to be together forever or that their desires are going to stay the same. But what I can do is give you the tools to go with the flow of those changes, because that's life, right? Like there's no guarantees in life. Bad things are going to happen. Good things are going to happen. Sometimes we don't have the range to hold the good either. So I can give you the tools to navigate that, but I can't necessarily guarantee specific outcomes, nor would I want to, really, because that would take the fun out of it. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
So would you find like you're leading people to their own decision?
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
or are you prescribing solutions? Or is it always like you have to give people just light the path? I mean, yeah.
Sometimes it's a little bit of both, but overall, I'm backing what your desire is, and we can uncover kind of like what the truth of that desire is together. So you may think, for example, like I really want to go on a vacation, and then when we dig into that desire, we can see like, oh, I want freedom, and I want adventure, and I want exploration. And so then we can explore different ways that you could achieve those things underneath, right? So it might not be the thing over top. And that's the crux of all of this, is that, especially in relationship issues, is the fight is never about the thing over top, right? It's never about the socks on the floor. It's about what the socks on the floor represent. And so that's what we dig out, is what's the meaning that you're putting behind this? What are the perceptions? What are the beliefs? What are the values? How are you brought up to believe that the world is a certain way? So we just dig all that out and then pack back in what we like. And okay, we want to go in this direction now, or we want to go in this direction. So it's very, what I would say, feminine, in that it's like going with the flow. It's not so goal oriented in a masculine way. That's like point A to point B.
So here's a question I'm very interested in. In someone's life, how many times would you be able to like unpack that? Like if I almost think of it like something damming up, or like all this shit kind of filling up on someone's life, like, is it like usually it's all from childhood trauma or just even childhood? Mm-hmm. Or can these happen like over and over, where like people go in these cycles where they like get into a path and they go, and all of a sudden they find they're like not happy with everything they thought they'd be happy with, or stuff like that?
Yeah, so again, kind of both. If you look at trauma, there's developmental trauma, which happens in childhood, and then there's PTSD, which happens situationally, right? So it's like you think of like the soldier who gets blown up and then has PTSD from it. Or anybody who has been socialized as a human has developmental trauma. So we're looking at both. So there can be aspects of like things that happen that shape your worldview, but normally it's rooted, as a generalization, it's rooted in childhood of how you were taught. Because what's going on is your brain is actually developing when you're little, right? And those neural pathways are developing. And that has to shift and change in order for you to see the world in a different way as an adult. So we're uncovering and correcting some of the things that happened in childhood that warped your worldview, and just gently questioning, okay, is it still true now in real time? Or could some other possibility be true? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So that, I guess my question is like, you're decoding, or asking the question, is that true in real time? Mm-hmm. Do people, if you unpack all that, and I'm assuming, I know for myself, it was like lots of work and took a lot of energy, but like you do all that, then 15 years goes by. Can the new thing, like that time of a person's life, do something in that time frame to go backwards, or would you just find new things that are kind of like, would a person, because I'm just in my early 30s, like I've only been an adult for since I finished high school, and I would argue even less time than
that. It depends on what you would define as adulthood too,
Probably like a month, but.
I feel like from what you're saying, this stuff happens, like you said, when you're just developing as a human being. So I would assume this becomes your reality.
Yeah.
And to shift somebody's reality, that's a monumental task.
It's layers at a time. And I think if you go in the way that you went in really deep into do your work, you can peel back a really big layer at a time. But I still think that for the rest of your life, you're going to be peeling back those same layers. It just won't feel quite as traumatic because you'll have more agency with it. You'll understand yourself a little better. But I think that we are in relationship with ourselves to such a high degree that we're infinitely complex beings in and of ourselves, right? So until our dying day, we're going to be learning new things about ourselves if we're willing to look. And that's awesome. I think that's awesome. And it doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with you or bad or that you even necessarily need healing. It's just, is this working for me? Is this not? Is this working for me? Is this not? And continuously using that as your compass. So yes, I think you do continually grow, but it doesn't have to be it
wouldn't be that same extent.
So dramatic, yeah.
Because I assume many people go through their entire life without correcting maybe some sort of really poor perceptions of the world that really hold them back. I don't know.
Yeah. And it depends on the type of person. We're all so different.
Have you ever sat with someone and you they were never going to, I assume they have to make their own choice. Have you sat with someone who's no matter what you say, they
for sure
won't?
They just won't. They're either just not ready now, or I think that everybody's going to go through some crisis at some point where they're going to really have to look at things. We all have loss in our future, right? We all do. So whatever happens, we're going to have to deal with that. And that's often a rock bottom for people to like the wake up call, or the place where the soul wakes up, or the dark night of the soul, or whatever you want to call it. That happens. And then it's okay, I'm in crisis point. I have to make a new decision here because what I'm doing isn't working. And it consistently hasn't worked over and over again. So it's kind of when you are dating a bunch of different people and then none of them work out, and finally it gets to the point where you have a choice. You can either go from I'm the common denominator in this, so if that's the good and the bad news, because I can do something about that, or I can go into blame and say all men are awful, and that doesn't really serve me either, right? So it's just a matter of gaining awareness and consciousness around what we're doing and why. Does that make sense?
Does spirituality play a role in what you do?
Yeah.
Professionally?
Yeah, it definitely does. Because I think you can't take that out of the human experience either. You can't take the fact that we're going to die out of the human experience, that we're mortal, that we have a finite amount of time. So it doesn't really matter to me what you believe. You could be atheist, you could be Catholic, you could be just New Age, hippie, you could be whatever. But we'll find some way, some commonalities to weave into it, or through the AA program, it's just your higher power, right? The things that you can't control, nature, the universe, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter to me. But it does come into play because there's just things that we can't control, right? So that's part of the holistic health, in my opinion.
And so you've, like, do you personally subscribe to like any one religion then, or do you just feel like this is a part of the human experience and the mortality, the fact that mortality, like you said, is common across everybody that will ever be born, means that everybody's going to cope with that part of the human experience a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And so you just work with that.
Yeah. And I have my own personal beliefs and kind of, I am really obsessed with quantum physics and like all of like the new age, how we're all part of the plasmic field and all of that stuff.
Oh, I want to hear about
all of
that.
it. Well,
string
I don't,
theory.
I'm not, well, not string theory.
I like being drunk and then that expression of like we're the universe experiencing itself.
Right. Yeah, all of that.
Do you
so good.
Do you dig that?
I dig it. But I also have a really practical part of my personality. So I kind of have like a really left and right brain balance. I have the holistic artistic side, but I also am a pharmacist. I'm a scientist too, right? So I like both. So I can't say that I could explain it, but I watch a lot of YouTube videos.
Give me your theory. What's your running theory on how we get to have this conversation?
This wasn't what I was expecting to talk about.
Neither was I.
Neither was I.
I think that we're all, like, I think everything is connected in that, how to go into this. Just basically what they're showing in quantum physics is that everything that's matter is energy, right? And it all happens in waves and interference patterns, and that carries with it information. So we're in this feedback loop with nature, with the universe, where we're communicating back with it. So one of the people I like to listen to is Nassim Haramein, and he talks about how if you statistically tried to get a blind guy to solve a Rubik's Cube blind without any feedback, it would take eons and eons, like it would take an infinite amount of time almost. But if you just give him one little piece of feedback, he could solve it in a fairly short amount of time. So if you look at that, there's this, and the way our bodies work is all feedback mechanisms too.
When you say one, just so I understand you, like what would be a feedback for a blind guy trying to solve a Rubik's Cube?
So like you're getting further away from it or you're getting closer.
Okay, hot or cold?
Hot or cold. As simple as that, it dramatically increases the statistical odds that he'll solve it in a shorter amount of time. Mm-hmm. And if you look at nature works like that too. So we're feeding back, and now that we're learning more about cybernetics and how networks work, and if you listen to Elon Musk talk about this kind of thing, like we're just networks. Like our brain is a network. And psychocybernetics is a really interesting topic too, because it's like you've got wiring in your brain literally that affects your experience, right? So in that way, I think we're constantly giving feedback into whatever the soup is that we're in, and then it's in turn forming our experience. So this whole like you create your own reality type stuff is true. It's true in a practical sense too, because if you, like, even if this is not provable, at the baseline, if you're acting in a certain way and assuming that people are acting in a certain way, you're going to get certain results with people, right? So like if you're going into it with low self-confidence and you're expecting the person to not see your value, then chances are they're not going to see your value and they're going to dismiss you, or they're not going to hire you for the job or whatever, right? But if you go into it with confidence and you go in just expecting to have the job or have the experience, then your outcome, your possibility expands. So in that sense, it makes sense to me, but yeah.
So we're so structured here on the show.
Yeah.
So my next question for you is, have you ever coached somebody on job negotiations or salary negotiations for a job?
I would say that I coach people, not specifically. I'm trying to think.
Like you mean just in the
Not-
past ever, or like?
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Not specifically, but what I have coached people on is holding sensation, like holding the sensation that it takes to ask for things that you really want. So that I have.
Explain that.
So, you know when you get nervous and you're like shaking and you like your heart's beating faster and you're just like anticipating something? Well, that's sensation in your body. And so to be able to stay present with that and not put stories around it, because if you think of when you're really excited versus when you're really nervous. It's that heart beating, butterflies in your stomach, like all of those are sensations, and they're actually neutral.
Like you said physiologically, those two, like I think excitement and fear.
Excitement and fear are
the same
yeah.
body, like physiological
sensations.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're the same sensations, but what changes it from nervousness to excitement is the story you put around it, right? So the sensations themselves are actually neutral. They're information. They're giving you information, feedback, right? There's something sensationally going on in my environment right now. So when we start to look at the stories that we put around these sensations, that's where we get, that's where we get the outcomes. That's where we can actually examine what's going on. Because something that's exciting is just, I'm anticipating something positive is going to happen. If you're nervous, you don't know what's going to happen, or you're anticipating something negative. And those are the places where we can start to examine if that's true or not, right? If you're actually like coherent with reality in real time, or it's coming from something from your past. So like for some people, they're gonna bring in all these associations around authority if they're talking to somebody that they wanna ask something for, like a raise, right? And so it's like staying present with those sensations is what increases your range to hold them. And then you can go into that situation and be like, I know I'm gonna feel these sensations, and I can stay present with it, and I can stay conscious within that experience. And that's kind of what I teach people to do.
Is this like fight or flight stuff? Like if you're not staying present, that's when you're like doing like the backing down as quick as possible, like.
Yeah.
Or before you even ask, you're kind of convincing yourself you don't need it, or
right.
Like you're telling yourself.
If you're going into fight or flight, your prefrontal cortex is actually shutting off.
Okay.
And you're going all into your hindbrain of survival. And so we want to notice when that's happening, so that we can teach our bodies that, no, you actually are safe in real time. The thing that's causing this physiological response is actually a thought or a belief that's giving feedback to the body. And then again, we can increase the range around holding that and staying present for that, and showing the body that it's safe in these situations. And that takes practice and some healing. But there's different things that you can do around that too. But that's the first kind of noticing where you're triggered, noticing where you're going into fight or flight is the key kind of into that subconscious.
So you're saying when Jack Nicholson says woo-saw to Adam Sandler in that movie, that is an activity to try and regain control of those emotions?
Yeah, to stay conscious within them.
Is that a real one?
But, well, it's one technique, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Just becoming aware of what's going on and taking a second to ground. Yeah, that could be one.
You shared something really interesting with me that really like stuck with me, and I think of it all the time. And you said people don't do things, or like people do the weirdest things that seem counterproductive, but like they'll do it because they get something out of it.
Yeah.
And that always kind of like, it's like so bizarre, and yet since you've told me, I've been able to see it as a truth. But like, I don't know, any someone who doesn't go to the gym but says they want to lose weight.
Right. Yeah.
They're doing one type of behavior, yet they say they want the other.
Sorry, so the act of saying it is like them trying to like mentally stimulate themselves or prepare themselves to actually go to the gym, although they don't do it.
Maybe my example sucks. I don't know. Like
No, it makes sense. Like so you're saying so you set a New Year's resolution or something, and you're saying I want to lose weight, or I want to get healthy,
or value health even.
Or this is my value. This is something, and you could really want it too, right? You really want to get in shape. You want to be healthy. But then all of these sabotaging behaviors come in, where you sleep in, or you don't make the effort to go, or whatever happens, right? That you don't actually make the effort. So what we look at is, how is that serving you? Why is it that what are the benefits of not going to the gym, as an example? So that, because there's that part of your personality that's digging their heels in and is like, no, I don't want to go to the gym, as an example. And that's worth looking at too, because that helps you understand a part of your personality that maybe is being neglected, or maybe is just a subconscious part of you. But there's always some need that's getting met by not pursuing the thing. If you're finding that you have a tough time motivating yourself to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So then here's kind of the question I get into is like, do people get it? Like, if a person, let's say, is perfectly balanced and very like right with themselves, are they going to necessarily be healthy and thin, or is it still like they're and like great in relationships, or is it still their values determine at the end of the day the way they behave, or I don't know.
I haven't met anybody that's perfect like that. I think that we're on a kind of in flux of figuring things out, myself included. Like I'm far from perfect. So we're always going to be kind of weaving in and out of that and learning about ourselves. And I think that's, again, part of the human experience. We're not meant to be like pristinely balanced.
So let's talk about like some extreme versions of that, like depression. I've heard people say, like, in a similar sort of context, this is a conference I went to, and the guy's like, and I can ask this because I'm not an expert, but it's like everyone is depressed. He's like talking about clinical depression. Mm-hmm. It's like people that are clinically depressed get something out of it. Mm-hmm. Even on that extreme scale, It's just we have a society that's turned it into. Yeah. I mean, this is a taboo subject, but I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Like, we have a society that wants to fix or deem someone as broken, as you said earlier, and then wants to fix brokenness or whatever. Like, would that be a good case of like they get something out of it, or like the best case of it maybe? Or?
Yeah, and I can see where you don't want to go into this taboo realm of blaming the victim kind of thing, or blaming people for having things that they're not in control of. So I get that, but also everything that happens is serving you in some way, and if you can find that and meet the need. So depression as an example.
Is that a bad example or a great example?
Well, I'm just trying to think of how I could weave that in. So depression to me this is my opinion, this is not the medical opinion, but in my opinion, depression is a symptom, not a disease in and of itself. And there's a lot of things that we could talk about that's the same, but I think that there's something going on physiologically, spiritually, emotionally, that is not being addressed, and it's your body's way of telling you. So if we can examine what's going on there, we can help. Again, where I come in to help with that wouldn't be at the crisis point where you're like not functional because of your depression, but maybe you have like a subclinical depression or subclinical anxiety. That's where I could help, because you're still, you're at the point where you can look at yourself. So what I always say as a pharmacist is antidepressants help you, they basically help you drive your car. If your car is covered in mud, they kind of help you windshield off the wiper off the windshield, and then you can see a little bit clearer where you want to go, but they're not meant to be a cure. They're meant to be a tool to help you figure out what the root cause of what was going on was, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So we want to get to the root cause, not just cover up symptoms. And that's what drew me out of pharmacy and into more of this psychological stuff, is because it gets to the root cause of what's going on, instead of just slapping a pill over top of it or a Band-Aid, which is way more fulfilling for me.
For sure.
In my like healing part.
So yeah, we were talking about like, you know, medication used as a Band-Aid, or sorry, as a solution, and you're saying it's not, and that's pushed you away. Now is that like a...
For the chronic things. For acute care, we're nailing it. Like if you go to the emergency room and you need to get your leg fixed, or you have a heart attack, we're good with that. But when it comes to the chronic issues like depression, even things like diabetes, hypertension, a lot of the cancer, a lot of it has an emotional component to it. So we want to start looking at the emotional stuff that's going on, that's giving that feedback again to your body and telling it it's not safe. And then all of those, sorry that I interrupted you there.
No,
all of those resources that are going into continually telling your body that it's not safe because of these perceptions are robbing you of those resources going into your immune system and your digestive system and your healing and your sleep, right? Like depressed and anxious people often have a tough time sleeping. So all of these resources that should be going into your parasympathetic system or your like resting part of your nervous system are all being shunted towards defense and protection and survival. And it's because of thoughts. So we want to change the thoughts so that we can calm the body down, so that we can be healthy and conscious and present.
So
I'm going to share the craziest story just like as an anecdote, and you can ask that question after. I know a guy, and he broke up with his girlfriend. He was maybe 23 at the time, and his hair fell out. He had he had like literally like patchy hair. Like like some of his hair was still in, and he had like the biggest curly fro beforehand, and then like this like non-physical, like relational thing happened, and it was like, and then ever since then he like shaved his head, and it never came back either. It
never came back, eh?
Which is just like, I was like, I had no idea the power of like feel, like the way you could feel could affect you so much. Like,
yeah.
So anyway, that's like a really weird example of like, I'm very skeptical of stuff like that, and I guess like that one's like, you can see when someone has like no or patchy hair. And I remember because I could see his head, and it was like, you'd have like the darker bluish shade where the hair would actually still grow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then like these like really clear patches where it was like just skin, you know?
That's nuts.
So anyway.
I was just going to ask, are there certain cultures then that do a better job of fostering a good, like, I guess, emotional environment for everybody living in them, and other cultures that do a poor job of that? Like, as you study these things, are there examples of cultures that are doing a great job of this?
Off the top of my head, like right now, any culture that has a really strong sense of community is doing better than ones that are really isolated in these like nuclear families. So as an example, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but they have done longitudinal studies on cultures that were really cohesive as a community, and everyone had a purpose, and everyone had a role, and they were looking after each other, and like the elderly had roles and the kids had roles and everybody knew each other. Those people had less incidence of heart attack and cardiovascular disease than the same types of people who were living in, say, like America at the time. But then as soon as you separated them out and you got rid of that community aspect, they got just as sick as the rest of the population. Can I quote what study this was? No, but I remember reading that in a book one time, that sense of community is such a strong part of the way that we evolved as social creatures, that if you take that away, and that's what our culture has mainly taken away, is that community aspect, then you have, everything starts to break down physically.
I just heard a TED talk about it 2 weeks ago, and it was a study done by Harvard on about 800 men, and the study's now like 75 years old. And the talk was given by a guy who's been, it's like this kind of study is like a baton, like you get handed the research down. So he's like third down the line on these men. And the talk was about, so far, so they have a good data pool now. It's like the men at 50 years old with people they could count on, like people they could just like actually, they were like relationships that were very like loyal, like didn't have to be like, a lot of it was marriages, but it was like, it didn't have to be like the best marriage. It just had to be a marriage. Like if something happened, they knew they could count on their partner. Those were the people who got the least sick and did like physically sick in their like 80s and 70s.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I was like, that's insane. And it wasn't like, and they did well with their families and like tons of different things. But it was like, kind of like there's like that anecdote about like grip strength for elderly people. Like when elderly people lose their grip strength, it's like a bad sign. And this one was like, when you're 50, if you have those kind of relationships and networks of people you can count on. And I guess you would only get that if you reciprocate, but it was like really interesting. It's like that kind of power.
Yeah.
I was
It's really important.
I was gonna say, like, even things like Airbnb. At first, like when I heard about the concept, I'm like, this is insane. Like, who wants to go stay at somebody else's stranger's house?
Yeah.
But my wife and I are total believers. Like, we use it all the time when we travel, and I find it to like part of the fun of it is meeting people that live in, we always travel to places that are more so like touristy destinations or places that would be like highly coveted to live in, I would assume. And then to like meet the people that actually own these properties and to talk to them. And it feels like I want to be on my best behavior because I feel like they're welcoming me into their homes.
Right.
And I feel like such a high level of hospitality on their end, and I'm so thankful for them to do that. It's just like the humanity just pours in, and it's amazing to me like how like as soon as I did it once, I was like, I get it, and I guess it's like it's kind of like in our nature to be that way, and like you said, like we've become I guess the previous generation Gen X became a little bit more isolated, but it feels like we're moving back in that direction. And I guess a lot of that has to do as well with like technology. Like even like with Uber, me being able to get into somebody's vehicle and knowing that like I've always been able to rate the service provider or whoever the business owner is, whoever the proprietor is, I've always been able to rate that person. For the first time ever, there's a business model where it's a two-way rating system.
Yeah.
And how cool is that, the concept of that? Because all of a sudden now, when I get into a vehicle, I want to try and not act like a jackass.
You're on trial.
Yeah, you want to do the best that you can to be not only, thankful for the ride, but just be on your best behavior. And I think that's a cool concept. And it still feels like really, really new and fresh.
Yeah.
So like, what do you think about like the role that technology is playing in all of this? And do you have any sort of I guess theories on like or any sort of ideas on how that might disrupt other industries, how like redefining or sort of reinforcing good social behavior will disrupt other industries?
Well, we're just in this wild time to be alive, aren't we? Where technology is changing so quickly, so fast, whereas things that used to take decades to change are now happening in months, right? And our nervous systems took millions of years to evolve. So the ability to catch up with that is going to have an impact down the road, right? Like we don't, like if you look at kids watching iPads when they're like 6 months old and they're just glued to the screen, right? It's creepy. And so
the screen's upside down.
Yeah.
And they don't care.
And then
the volume's it's in French.
Yeah.
No, friend of mine, not me.
Yeah. But they're one and they can do things on it and they're just glued to it. And you can already see that addictive process kind of starting. And so in some ways it's cool because it's helping us be more connected and it's helping us create businesses like Uber or like Airbnb and that rating system. But if you watch Black Mirror, you can see how that can go terrible pretty fast. Have you seen that episode on the nosedive episode?
Is that the one where everybody's like, the karma points are like showing up above people's heads or something? And then everybody's like starting to protect the way that they act and who they associate with so that their karma points will go up?
Right. Because if you don't have enough points, then it puts you in a hierarchy in society, right? So you've got to be perfect, or you got to appear as being perfect in order to be able to buy a house, and that's the kind of downside or evil or thing that we want to kind of have awareness around, is that there's always a downside to everything. So, and personality included. There's nothing that's all good or all bad. We're both good and evil. And so technology is a tool. Money is a tool. It has aspects of it that are evil, that create chaos and damage in the world, and it has benevolent aspects to it too. So that's technology as well. We just want to be really conscious about what we're doing so that it doesn't spin into something that we can't control anymore.
Well, I think it's like really important that that governments start to figure out and understand that they're always going to be reacting to technology. Mm-hmm. Governments are never going to be on the cutting edge of technology. But that also means that there needs to be a higher level of education and understanding within government with everything that's going on.
And to me, that means having a really deep understanding on psychology and what's going on and how our brains are affected, how our development is affected, which we're just, every day there's new Health Canada alerts on the drugs that have been studied that cause issues that you needed time to see them come out, them to wash out, right? So like we only have, our science is so limited in controlling the variables that we have to give it time, but like things are changing so fast with technology that we don't have time to adapt to it or to learn enough about it. So we do have to kind of be careful when we're thinking of things that are actually changing our neurochemistry, like iPads in little kids.
For sure. Feedback loops.
Yeah.
So these like things, I assume these don't end as you age. Like it maybe just wouldn't have as much of an impact, but like the way, let's talk about Instagram. Like Instagram just switched away from being able to see like counts.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that. So
like
I have a few, one for my business, one for me. And they kind of roll out the change differently for different people. So like I have one account, I can still go see like counts. Mm-hmm. And then my other account, it's like all limited. And it's like there's no way to do it unless you actually counted. Like you can see like click, Dustin Ratzlaff and others. And then you could just like, okay, I could scroll for eternity.
Okay, you can still do that.
But you would have to count them yourself.
Right.
And it's like, I don't know, do you think that's them adapting to the game? Like, I mean, I'm a photographer and like every photographer I know is, they're in this like game, this like artificial bullshit. Like I hate it. I like actually hate it. And it's like, I don't know. I'm glad it's gone. I'm like, good. You made the game go away. Like
right. But when another game will replace it.
Well, I feel like they would never do something that would sabotage themselves, but also maybe they're doing it to protect themselves. Maybe they saw it was toxic. Like even my wife, like she's on a social media break right now. She like deleted all the apps. Mm-hmm. She was like looking at posts and being like, that was like really affecting her. She's like, oh, look at me in my perfect life. Mm-hmm. Why is it overexposed? Oh, because that's just how the camera is. It's not like makes my skin look better. But yeah, anyway, here's the rest of my perfect day. Like,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah, it does. It affects us. It 100% affects us. So again, it's not about it being good or bad. It's having the consciousness. It kind of ties back into the why do we do things that we know aren't good for us, even though we have a goal and we want to meet that goal, but we still sabotage ourselves, or we don't do it, because there's always a good and a bad. There's always a good reason to go to the gym and a good reason not to, right? So there's always good and evil in everything, and that's what we start to accept in ourselves, that I have motives that are good, I have motives that are bad, and that's part of what makes me human, and that's actually inherently okay, but I want to bring conscious awareness into why I'm doing what I'm doing and what my motives are. So there's a lot of different theories around what's happening with this like thing, but there's some question of it. Is it just about money? Is it too many people are making money off of social media and that machine itself isn't good? Or is social media allowed to limit our free speech, right? Like, who gets to decide who takes people off or bans people from Twitter, or, right?
But, you know, we're doing it to each other too. Like when I follow certain people and they say things that are controversial or totally against the grain, I may still have an affinity or a love for that person. I just don't agree with some of the things that they say. But all of a sudden, like, I feel forced to disassociate myself with some people, because if I like anything that they do, then other people might associate me with the things that I don't like that person does, or just something like that. And like, I think that was part of like this like hiding likes thing as well. Like, you know, there's some accounts that like you're friends with those people because you've known them forever, but you would never acknowledge their post by liking them, just because you don't do that to those people. However, they always show up in your algorithm because you always like looking at their stuff.
Right.
But you would never be caught.
because it's tracking when you like stall, and you know
So
how
creepy.
and you know how
But like
you know how it compressed all the writing.
You know,
so you
like-
have to
Yeah.
click read more. Bang, another metric. It knows
Yeah.
knows everything you're doing.
Yeah,
knows
but
everything
like it's
you're
like
doing.
we're self-censoring because we don't want other people to see that. Like that's also crazy. That just happened.
Yeah.
Like, so just social media in general, like it does that.
Yeah.
It does that to people, which is nuts. Actually, just today on the podcast, The Daily, one of the co-founders of Facebook just did a piece in the New York Times talking about how he feels that Facebook is now too big. It's a monopoly and it needs to be broken apart by the government because Mark Zuckerberg has too much power. This was like one of the co-founders of Facebook saying this in the New York Times. It's a pretty interesting article and a pretty interesting conversation.
Yeah.
It's talking about how like this is a guy that has like an engineering and coding background, smart dude, but like not in a position to be trying to self-regulate and sort of put in his own checks and balances to make sure that governments and foreign entities aren't manipulating people on a mass scale using his platform, and then expecting that he'll be able to self-regulate it moving forward.
Yeah.
Like I almost trust them more than any government getting in there, to be honest. Like, I would rather it stay private.
I think it's really funny right now because like you see places like Great Britain where they have all kinds of legislation that's like super strict on what can and can't be done online, and I think it's like, you know, they're either setting a new standard for a lot of online activities, or we're going to realize that like it's impossible to regulate this stuff at the level, like at this level that they would like to. But yeah, like you said, it all moves so fast.
It
Like,
all moves so fast.
you don't really get an opportunity to figure out like what the hell this is doing to people.
Yeah. And who is making decisions, and are we self-selecting, or are we, because the algorithms are really pushing us in certain directions, whether that was intended or not, it is, right? And so like, what's the consequence to all of this? What is the consequence of algorithms? What's the consequence of banning people off of social media and saying, no, you're allowed to have a voice and you're not allowed to have a voice, right? Like this thing that started out as this super free speech, this is just a platform for you to do your stuff, right? And now YouTube videos are taken down and yeah, where do you draw the line? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that, but I think they're important questions to ask. And again, bringing it back to psychology of what are our motives here? What are we doing? What are we doing as a community, as like here, the ethics of the 220 or the ethics of Saskatoon, or as a species? What's the direction we want to go in? What are we doing? And when you don't have an aim, that's where shit gets cray, right? Like we got to have like some collective thing that we're working on. If you look in history, any time that we've been like together in some kind of collective movement, we can do whatever we want. But there has to be something that we're aiming towards. And right now it's like survival, I guess.
So what stops a movement like Occupy Wall Street from actually having any real change? How could was it a lack of having an actual ask? Was it just people being like, I'm fed up with the disparity between the rich and the poor and I don't like it, but not having some sort of action plan? Because like to have, hundreds of thousands of people like physically go to different spaces and create such a disruption, and then nothing happens, nothing gets done.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I don't know. I think part of it would be having to look at what looking at the actual motivations of the people, of what was going on. Was it out of true inspiration? Was it out of resentment? Was it out of, what was the actual motivation underneath that? Because that pushes your drive forward. Is it, as an example, I don't actually know what the answer to that is. It's probably multifactorial. But I do know that somebody who's connected to their desire in the truest form of what they want to do, whether it's like creatively or relationship or whatever it is, that drive in their life that they're attached to, and they're pushing for that, and they understand, they have the consciousness to kind of understand what their motives are, that those are the people that don't give up, right? Because ultimately they gave up too. And either you're not giving up out of survival and fear, or you're not giving up out of desire. So
what's a stronger motive, fear or desire?
I think it probably, so they're two sides of the same coin in my estimation. So it's like we have desire to branch out of our comfort zone, to evolve, right? To like come out of the cave and explore. But if the basic fear hasn't been handled and looked at, then you're never going to go outside the cave. If you're scared that there's a lion right there, you're never going to exit out of the cave, right? To the point where you starve to death inside the cave. So fear is very powerful. But desire is the thing that actually helps us evolve and grow and be fulfilled as people, because we have this evolutionary drive to explore and to like push out of our comfort zone and like learn new things and adapt. And that's part of how I think the universe works too, is it's like continuously striving to create something new, to have a different experience. So whether you think of like that as an evolutionary thing or as a spiritual thing, doesn't really matter to me. Both of them make sense. So yeah, I did not think we were going to talk about any of this stuff today.
What did you think we were going to talk about?
Coaching and like, I don't know, more about my background.
Let's talk. We still have time left. So, you're studying to be a psychologist?
I'm studying to be a counselor.
So you won't be a psychiatrist at the end? Or
No.
No.
A psychiatrist is a doctor, like a medical doctor.
Okay.
So I'm definitely
and
not a
psychology
medical.
is like...
And then clinical psychologist is its own thing. And then a counselor is its own thing too.
Okay.
So this, and like you said, you're a trained pharmacist as well.
Mm-hmm.
I assume pharmacists get paid quite a bit more money than a counselor would.
It depends. It depends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like I like your answer for why you do it. You want to make real change in people, like help people have real change. It's very noble. It's awesome. Like, I guess like part of me would be like, but you could make so much more.
Yeah, well, I being the entrepreneur kind of spirit too, like I have the potential to make more, and whereas owning a pharmacy is not my idea of a fun time. So, I mean, for some people it is, and they've made some mad cash off of pharmacies, but it's just not where my heart is.
And so far you haven't picked between pharmacy and coaching, like you've done both at the same time.
I'm doing both, but I call pharmacy my muggle job.
Muggle job.
I do it to keep the lights on, to get through school, and I've worked so hard to get there that I'll probably keep doing it for a while just to kind of max out on it. But if I'm honest, I will let it fall away as soon as I can.
And have you found a lot of success with coaching?
I'm getting there. It's like it's a work in progress, but because it's people don't understand what it is, right?
Sure.
It's a new thing. Life coaching has its own connotations to it too, right? And so what I find is that I'll introduce myself, even if because I primarily do coaching. I work pharmacy 2 days a week, and the rest of the time I'm doing coaching. So I'll introduce myself as a health and relationship coach, and then people will be like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. Or they're like, stop, like, no, conversation over. But as soon as I say, and I'm a pharmacist, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's legit.
She's not crazy.
She's not just like some chick in her basement who got some certificate on the internet.
Because there's a lot of people who just, they're like,
absolutely.
They can help people, and some of them can. But if you were to finish this sentence, how would it go? People hire me to help them.
My first thought, best thought, is to find peace, to find just joy in their lives, in their relationships, in their bodies, in their life.
And so how would someone even know to reach out to you? Like,
so far,
I assume there's people who don't know
most
the way
people
they
don't
live
know.
is like actually changeable, or there's hope that they don't have to settle.
That is not even normal.
Yeah, what their normal is so messed up.
Well, if you think of how much, even in the last 10 years, the stigma around mental health has changed.
Thanks to Bell,
right?
Corporate Canada.
So
I hate that, but good for them.
It's a work in progress just around the mental health aspect. And then, like you said yourself, you have your doubts or you're skeptical around that mind-body emotional connection. So we've been very much conditioned and trained to find our emotions as like untrustworthy.
Yeah.
And that intuition, is that even really a thing? And, so there's all of this skepticism around it. But if you actually look at the science of the mind-body connection, it all does make logical sense. It's just a matter of learning about it, being aware of it, and seeing how that applies to your own life. But you also have to be willing to look at yourself, because there's things that we don't want to look at, that we're in denial about, that we're self-protecting about. Like my dad is super interested in what I'm doing, but and he'll ask questions, but when we start to dig in too deep, he'll get defensive. Or he'll be like, no, that couldn't be it. It's like, Dad, you're not even thinking of this like a scientist. And he's an engineer.
Are you pinging a nerve on him?
I'm pinging a nerve, exactly. And it's not even, we're being as objective as we can about it. It's like, okay, like just consider, could it be something from your childhood around self-worth? Nope, couldn't be that. And it's like, let's just look at this objectively, like scientists. Could it be something, I don't know for sure, but let's do an exploration. Like, let's make a hypothesis and test it. Nope. And he's a scientist, right? So you hit a nerve, and then you have to be able to come back. And that's why I like coaching too, is if I sell packages and I get them to pay up front, then they've invested up front, and when it gets hard, they come back. Whereas it's so easy, even for physiotherapy or whatever, to be like, I don't need to go.
I'm not broken.
Right? Or like that's $200 that I could spend here. Like or massages or whatever. Like I could go do some self-care, but I also could spend it here. And then we do that justification, which is that self-sabotage, which is that serving the need of not having to look at yourself, because it's scary and it's painful and it's not always fun.
I like that idea and applying it to me going to the dentist. See if my dentist will take $1,000 from me at the beginning of the year and say, I want you to not have this be non-refundable and it to turn into a credit that expires in 365 days, or like whatever the number is that would be for a responsible, fully developed adults to be going to see the dentist, just to put that pressure on me up front to be like, oh no, like, I can, or I can go, I don't have to go, but if I don't go, now I'm squandering, money.
Right. Look at all the good life.
Do you expire your?
They do expire, yeah.
So that. Because I've done a payment thing with someone for like a kind of like a massage, but like I bought a 10-pack. I used 5, and I'm like, I know I could use them anytime, and so I haven't done the last 5.
Yeah, they do expire. Yeah.
Good move.
Yeah. So because it gets hard, and I'm pretty good at using my scalpel well. Like I'll give you a lot of approval around what's going on with you. So it's a little bit softer of a blow. Like I'm not just gonna like be a jerk to you. And if I see something that's going on, I'm obviously gonna try to bring it up in a way that you can hear it, right? That you can look at it. But it's still like it brings up a lot of sensation and emotion in people, and fear, right? So it's fear that we've been avoiding our entire lives, and to have that brought up to the surface to look at. I know as the coach that on the other side of it is the hero's journey, is like the gifts and the freedom and the peace. And I know that because I've been there, done that, but they don't know that yet, right? So
who responds best? What people are like primed the best to follow through? Is there a trend or a type of person or like a trauma that's common that people have worked through, or? Like you were talking to me once about addiction, and people who have addiction have like incredible power when they like beat like alcoholism or whatever it is. Like, I don't know. If they can switch that addiction to another type of addiction, like that's quote unquote positive or functional, or then their ability to be resourceful and get things done and like get their fix is unlimited. Right? It's just we want to switch that out for something that actually benefits them instead of spiraling down.
I was under the impression that if you were the type of person who got addicted or could be addicted, then you would always be addicted. And you could, like you just mentioned, like you could transfer that addiction to something more positive, but you'll always have that mindset or those tendencies?
I think the tendencies is the important word there, but it's like we talked about with the layer, like you can peel back a really thick layer around addiction and heal a lot, but there's always going to be you're always going to have little echoes of it. So you got to be careful. And that's why in 12-step, they say it's a day at a time, because you may have done a bunch of healing and you're back in your healthiest way. That doesn't mean that there's going to be no temptation in the future or because again, like hard things happen, and these are our coping mechanisms for when these hard things happen. So we might slip up again, and that's okay, because we screw it up and then we clean it up, and then we screw it up and we clean it up. That's just kind of like the process of being human. That's okay. It's great as long as we're getting that feedback and we're learning and we're staying. Because that's what makes it less dramatic. If you're doing things consciously, like you have some kind of emotional reaction, or you get into a fight with somebody, or that's a test. And it's like you can either learn from it and be like, okay, this is more information in my data bank that I can draw on. Or you can make excuses for it and learn nothing from it, and then repeat the whole cycle again until you're ready to make the change. And that's the people that are my best clients, is they've done the cycle so many times that they've now recognized that they're the common denominator in it, and that if they don't change, then they're just going to keep getting the same results over and over and over again.
That's got to be a eureka moment, hey?
Yeah.
Does everybody get it with you? If
I would say 90% do.
like it's a high rate, like
Yeah.
they're already primed because they've paid you and come to
Yeah.
you.
There's something in me that has spoke to them in some way. For them to dish out the amount of cash that they dish out to me, there's something that I've said that has stuck with them. And usually people that see me in action in coaching, because I have these events where we do kind of like a group coaching thing, formally, informally, and when they can see how I operate in real time, it's like there's something, usually one or two things that I say that really resonates with them, and they're like, yeah, I want to work with you. But that's not going to be everybody, nor does it need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the ones that are ready, that's great. The ones that aren't, they'll figure out their own way.
And I guess I just also want to make sure that we're not painting your entire business with the brushstroke of everybody that you work with is in some sort of trauma. You're saying that you work with people that are just trying to live a life of excellence and are looking
Yes.
to hit their higher calling.
Well, I guess I would argue that everyone's living in trauma. If you haven't looked at your stuff, you're probably living in trauma in some area of your life. Whether you're willing to look at it at this point in time or not, that's the debate. Like, that's the question. But if you're willing to look at it and you're willing to go from that point of like, things are good, like I've got a pretty sweet life, but for some reason it's not fulfilling me. That's where I can help you figure out what's going on there. Or if there's like some major obstacle, like the majority of my clients are women who've been through a breakup and they've been through the same relationship a few times, and they're like in their 30s and they want to get married or they want to have kids, and they're like, okay, like I got to figure this out now. So they're motivated, right? Because they're like, I only have a certain amount of time. So they're usually the ones that pick up on this the fastest, because they're really motivated to make the changes and to implement them. So I would say, though, that everybody has some degree of trauma, myself included. I still do. We all do. It's a part of socialization. So
If someone said, I'm good, you'd be like, you're just lying to yourself.
I'd be like, that's good that you think that. Yeah. Like, that's where they're at. And we can only meet people where they are. So they're just in denial about it, because everybody has a degree of it. And some people have a heavy degree of it. And some people, it's hidden more. It just, it expresses in different ways, because we're all so different. But
I could keep talking forever.
I think we did a great job. I'm really pleased with what's happened here.
Where can people find you?
They can find me here at the 220. They can find me online, palmer-coaching.com. Facebook, Brilliance Health Coaching.
And you can work with people anywhere in the world, because you do a lot of
Yeah.
remote sessions like FaceTime
Yeah.
or Zoom calls or whatever you call it.
The way my programs work is you get, it's called Mind Body Mastery, and you get an email once a week with a bunch of videos, and I give you a little teaching kind of read through, and every week has a different theme. So we've got mind body, we've got fear, we've got desire, we've got a whole bunch of different topics that we cover. And you get an email once a week, and then we talk once a week on the phone or in person, and we just chat like this. It's really...
And if I remember correctly, you do like a discovery call, or I don't know what you call it, but like you do a first call with everybody to just see if you can help them. So if someone was watching this and was like, something you said tonight was like what they needed,
right,
they can get a hold of you. Do a phone call, no risk.
Yep. So we spend an hour just chatting, and some of it's free coaching, some of it's just to decide, if we're going to be good to work together. Part of it is if you're willing to invest now and you're willing to look at yourself now, then you're a good client for me, because then I can do the most for you. But if you're kind of on the fence and you're like, yeah, like things could be better, but I don't really need them to change right now, then probably we either have to like put a pin in it and wait, or maybe I'm just not the coach for you. And that's okay too. But I also do, we could have so many conversations.
Sure, yeah, you could put a plug in for yourself right now.
I also have on Meetup, I have 2 groups. I have Saskatoon Healthy Living, which we just talk about health topics, and it's different presenters every time. And then I also have what are called turn-ons, where I teach about orgasmic meditation, which would be a whole podcast in and of itself.
Yeah, we
didn't even touch on that.
We missed this huge other topic.
Right, and then the relationship between the masculine and the feminine, and those polarities, and how those dynamics play out in relationship, and how orgasmic meditation works. So I do these turn-ons that we don't do the practice, because it's a partnered practice, and we don't do it, but we talk about it, and we talk about kind of like the sensation parts of it, and the purpose of it, and just we go into a bunch of stuff.
And that's for women.
Wild.
Correct.
Nope, it's for anybody.
Anyone. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've been doing them for 2.5 years now.
And where would people find that?
On Meetup.
Meetup.
It's called Turn On Saskatoon.
Turn On Saskatoon. Google that and you'll find it.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for
Yes.
coming on tonight and talking and sharing with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great.